Hello and welcome to the Supernatural Track here at Continual. I'm your host, Gail C. Martin, and tonight we are talking about Charlie Bradbury. So before we launch into that one topic, let's let our panelists introduce themselves, starting with Lola.
My name's Lola Larsey, and I've been watching Supernatural for a long time.
Okay, Carol.
Hi, I'm Carol Malcolm. I'm the director of the Urban Fantasy Track at DragonCon, and so we're excited that we have Supernatural guests again this year, and did the Supernatural Rewind panels for about a year and a half. I mean, when you take a few months break because of getting ready for DragonCon, that's about how much time I think we spent, wasn't it, Gail? And Gail was on all of those.
Well, 15 years is almost a year and a half just there without
just by itself. Yeah. So that's what I'm saying. I think from when we started to when we ended, it was literally a year and a half. And it was a lot of fun to revisit those early seasons, which I saw when they aired, and had seen some of the episodes over the years since then. But I did start watching it on day one when it began, except for bugs. I've never seen bugs. I will never see bugs. That's kind of my thing. I will never see it. I know. If I could listen to it without actually having to see the images, maybe I'll try that.
Okay, Elektra.
I'm Elektra Hammond. I'm a writer and an editor, and like Carol, I've been watching since the beginning, but I did not skip any episodes.
Well, mine was inadvertent at first. It didn't record, and then when I found out what it was about, I decided, no, I don't need to see that. That was back when it originally aired. And then when I was doing my rewatch, I was thinking, you know what? My life is fine without it. I don't need to.
That's what the wiki's for.
Yeah, Carrie Genzel, the actress who was in the shower with the bugs, was talking about that at length at the Supernatural Con in DC and her experience with the spider trainer. So,
oh God,
yeah. Sits. Okay, moving right along.
Yes, thank you.
Anne.
Hi, I'm Ann Wicker, and I'm a writer and editor and former journalist. And I actually came to the Supernatural family and universe late, but went completely down the rabbit hole. And I have just embraced it, and it's so much fun. And I've enjoyed talking. I enjoyed talking about it, obviously. I'm looking forward to talking about Charlie Bradbury tonight.
Yes.
And I'm Gail C. Martin, and Morgan Bryce. As Gail, I write epic and urban fantasy. As Morgan, I write urban fantasy, male paranormal romance. But all my modern worlds are ones where Sam and Dean could walk in and feel right at home. I found the show late in halfway through season 11, binge watched 11 seasons in 4 months so I could start live tweeting season 12. And that was the start of a wonderful, long, hopefully unending obsession with this show. Because I'm right down that rabbit hole with Anne, and maybe even a little deeper.
Yeah.
All right. So Charlie Bradbury, played by Felicia Day, who is one of those people who shows up in like all genre shows like Mark Shepard.
Right.
They're that person. If you don't know them, you need to turn in your geek card because they've been in kind of everything. But she does a marvelous job as Charlie Bradbury. What's your favorite Charlie episode or scene, Carol?
Well, I just love Charlie in general. I mean, I have been a fan ever since she first walked on, in her first scene in season 7. I thought, oh, this is going to be good. But my favorite, I think probably my favorite episode, just because, and I like it because of the episode itself, not just because her. The fact that she's in it probably helps in terms of how I feel about it, but it's one of my favorite episodes of the show, period. And it's the one where with Oz, with Dorothy from Oz, and they end up leaving.
Slumber
I
Party.
do. Yeah, yes, thank you. And you know, I just I thought that that was amazing. I always like when they do, you know, these kind of mashup episodes where you have something from folklore or fairy tales or something like that that ends up being, you know, part of the show. And the fact that they were, you know, able to tie in so many things about the men of letters and you know, and Dorothy, and you know, and they had this really cool, the monster of the week was a good one. You know, and so all of that, I really enjoyed that that whole aspect of that. And I think probably a runner up is the episode with her within the LARP, just because just because that was so funny that she was the queen. But anyway, definitely the Oz slumber party episode.
Okay, Elektra.
I think Carol hit my favorite too, and in that order. I'm a huge Oz fan. I've got all the original Oz books in at least 4 or 5 different editions. I have Oz puppets. I have all sorts of Oz stuff floating around. And and nothing can beat Dorothy near the end of the episode saying, "You have no idea what it's like to have a book series written about you."
Yeah. The guys were like, yeah, well, actually.
There are so many ins and outs there. Just there are so many bits and pieces of that episode that are fabulous. And Charlie as a character is just near and dear to my heart. You know, the hacker that just does everything for them in their back. She's the hacker they have in their back pocket whenever they need help with anything computer. It's sort of like, you know, the guy that dad calls whenever he can't get his computer to work.
Right.
doing, you know, computer support for dad. Charlie helps the guys. They're okay with stuff like searching and finding stuff and doing research, but when they really have the hard stuff, they have Charlie.
Right. I mean, Sam can hack into police databases and traffic cams and that sort of stuff, but the really high level stuff like creating a limitless credit card that never runs out, they need Charlie for.
Right.
Right.
Don't we all?
Yeah, really.
Oh, really?
Anne, how about you?
Well, I love both of the episodes you've already talked about a lot. And I'm a big Oz fan too. But I don't collect Oz stuff like you do, Elektra, but I love hearing that you have all those editions of the books. That's just so cool.
Yeah, that is great.
But I like I think my favorite was one I watched actually yesterday, the Pac-Man Fever episode, that's where we find out about Charlie's mother.
Oh yeah.
And she and the Djinn she sends Charlie into the loop of the video game, and then Dean joins her, and it's really emotional, and I feel like that's really where she and Dean connected. And he is so good trying to help her cope with her mother being, you know, in a vegetative state and she feels like it's her fault. And she's really, the emotional connection there was just really, I thought that was really well done with Jensen and Felicia. And the fact that, you know, in that world, his most important person was Sam, you know, and as the patient in that video game. And then when they came out of it, but I also love the fact that they do the little nods to, you know, come with me if you want to live. And,
right.
and then she just goes, I always wanted to say that. And then at the very end, when she's leaving the bunk, and it's also that she has begun to be a hunter too, and has her whole iPad set up, and she's marking off which monsters it's not. And so I thought that was pretty cute. And then at the very end, after this whole emotional thing, and she and Dean have connected, she tells him that she loves him, and he says, "I know," and we all know where that came
Right,
from.
where that came from, yeah.
Yeah, so it's those little nods like you were talking about, where they wove in the Oz stuff, and then these other little nods to geekdom and Star Wars and Terminator and everything. And I just really I really loved that emotional connection that she made with Dean in that episode.
Not to mention that Dean was wearing a bandolier. Now, if we could get the bandolier Dean with the thigh holster Dean from the end, would just kind of keel over.
Yeah.
I loved in The Girl with the Dragon, Dungeons and Dragon Tattoo, I loved watching Dean coach Charlie through trying to flirt with
with a man.
Yeah. And the look on Sam's face while Dean's doing it, Dean being supremely uncomfortable, and Charlie going, "I back for the other team." So that was really funny watching that, as well as her description of, do you have any tattoos? Yeah, naked Princess Leia on a 20-sided die. What? It was Comic-Con. I was drunk. I mean, I think we all just knew she was our people at that point.
Right.
Yeah.
And my other favorite is There's No Place Like Home, where we got the witch back and we got the bad Charlie and good Charlie. And of course, Felicia Day had joked that the pinnacle of her career was wrapping her thighs around Jensen in that fight scene. So say we, but she just carried the Charlie character with so much enthusiasm, and she wasn't playing it cynically, she wasn't playing it sarcastically. She just fully inhabited it with a kind of joy that I think she brings to the actress brings to all of her parts that make us love her so much, and certainly made us love Charlie. Lola?
My favorite episode is one we've been discussing, LARP and the Real Girl. I rewatched it today and it just makes me smile. I have a lot of friends who LARP, although their LARPing isn't as intricate as that. I mean, it's usually in a coffee house and, you're not in a forest and you don't sleep overnight or anything. It's just a few hour thing. Theirs was really intricate. I have a feeling they probably had like licenses and had to pay fees and stuff. But I remember thinking I was watching it today and I was like, it's like a Renaissance fair where you have to do a lot of work. I'd rather I'd rather just go to Ren Fair and eat turkey legs and drink beer. So yeah, but it still looked fun. And I loved how Dean, Dean's always so stoic and he always kind of looks down on anything nerdy. But he was like, it was kind of awesome. And then at the end, he goes full Braveheart with the speech and the little touches that are so cute, like he's about to get to the end of his speech and then someone yells hold and a person with a frisbee walks in and says sorry, and Dean's like, and then they let him continue and he's like, to freedom. And so little breaks like that are just really hilarious. And I just love Felicia Day so much. I love her characters. I love the fairy, and it was a really special episode, I thought.
Okay. Now we've also got alternative universe Charlie, whom we meet much later in the show, who is from the apocalypse world and not their Charlie, as she frequently reminds them. And yet in many ways she is their Charlie. Any thoughts on apocalypse world Charlie and getting to see her again on the show? Elektra?
Well, it was awesome to see her on the show again. And of course, if there was a Charlie in Apocalypse World, of course, she was going to be one of the leaders of the resistance and trying to get these damn angels the hell out of there. You know, there was no question that she was going to end up being a leader, because Charlie, she figured out how to hunt practically on her own. I mean, they let her know that these creatures existed, and she went and found resources and figured out how to hunt all by herself. You know, she didn't have Missouri to show her, to open the light and show her what was going on. She just did it.
Yeah, she didn't have a Bobby, except for what she
No.
learned later from the boys.
Yeah. But they
Yeah.
didn't want her to hunt. I mean, they like gave her the talk and expected her to hide under the bed. And she was determined to figure this thing out.
Mhm.
And she was invaluable. And that was a world where they didn't tell her to go hide under the bed, and she rose to be one of the important leaders. And, you know, it gave us the other side of her, the Charlie that wasn't afraid to pick up a gun and just go kick ass and take names.
Mhm. Anne?
Well, yeah, and she also in Apocalypse World, you know, she had lost her lover, and there were no Dean or Sam to you know, try to show her anything, and I think that because of that, and I put it down to Felicia's just really great acting, that she made her enough like our Charlie, but there was a little bit of a cynical undertone there that wasn't present in our Charlie, in Sam and Dean's Charlie. And it was, I mean, you really had to kind of pay attention, but I think she really nailed that in bringing back the character, or bringing in a character that's really a new character, and she built on it really well, I thought. And I thought that those episodes with her in Apocalypse World, and then coming back and being a hunter, and not being sure that she wanted to still do that, I think that was very telling. When she and Sam are sitting in the truck in that one episode about the weird fly people.
Yeah.
I kept thinking of that movie with help me, but
And Sam with the fidget spinner.
That's optimism.
yeah. And she was very, but again, you know, as Elektra said, she had learned everything, and she was still sitting there with a book, you know, going, you know, trying to increase her knowledge and figure out living in this new to her world. In a
Well,
world,
and she was the one who figured out what it was, not Sam.
yeah.
I loved in that glimpse we got in the one of the final episodes where Chuck was vaporizing everybody. We did get a glimpse that Charlie had found a partner. They were living together. They had a relationship. Everything was good until the partner vaporized. Presumably when Jack put everybody back, Charlie regained. We not only got Charlie back, because she eventually vaporized too, but the assumption was that everybody that Chuck had vaporized came back, courtesy of Jack. And so I like to think that once things wrapped up, Charlie was there with her girlfriend, and they were living a good life. And maybe Charlie eventually got out of hunting. Maybe she kind of became the new Bobby right there with Garth. Maybe she got out of doing it actively, but she had somebody, and she had a good life, and that made me happy.
Yeah.
Lola?
One of the things I've been thinking about since we were talking about alternate Charlie, I would think in one way her life was simpler over in the alternate world, because chaos was raining down and it was apocalypse. She didn't have to hide behind different names. She didn't have to change her name and move around and, you know, pretend to be someone else, because at that point no one cared. I don't think anyone was checking IDs.
Yeah. Well, your
Yeah, they
idea
probably
was,
didn't have any.
Probably didn't have any ID, so she got to blend in with other people more.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Carol?
and
Oh, I'm sorry, go ahead, Ann.
no, and she didn't have to have all the IDs in order to find the money to fund her mother's hospitalization.
Mhm.
True.
Carol?
Yeah, and something that Anne mentioned early on was what I always appreciated about not just the Charlie character, but Bobby and anybody else who was supposed to be a version of someone that we knew, is that I think that they did an excellent job of having just enough of that character to make you feel as though, oh, well, that is still kind of, ours. It's like when I was taking my notes for the rewind stuff, whenever it was somebody from that, it would be either Charlie 2 or Bobby 2, just to differentiate them in my own mind. But I did appreciate that as well, and I thought that was really good. And I do agree with you that there was a little bit of a cynical undertone
Yeah.
to the apocalypse world Charlie, but that's understandable given
Of course.
she still had the biting wit and the snark, but there was a spark of her that wasn't quite there. She wasn't quite as bubbly. She was very determined and still probably the smartest one person in the room regardless of where she was, that kind of thing. That was all the same, but there was that little core of why we fell in love with Charlie that I think was missing from this one. But I think that was intentional because of where she was coming from. I think
Yeah.
that so that we still could identify her as Charlie, even though she didn't seem exactly the same. She had enough, I think, that was in common with our original with Charlie 1.0. So but I was just grateful to see her again.
Yeah.
I mean, to be honest, and just like with Bobby, it was like, okay, I can acknowledge that there are some differences. And then when she did come over, with the whole group, when they came into our world, or Sam and Dean's world, however you want to put it, um, that she did have some adjustments to make. But even so, she still retained a lot of what she had been through. You don't live through something like what they had to what they went through, and all of a sudden just put it behind you and decide, well, this is what I'm going to do. I mean, for a while, she didn't have any choice of what she was going to do with her life. And then after she made that transition to this other world, she did have a choice. And so that's, I think, why she was questioning, do I want to keep doing this or not?
I think so. And yeah, and one thing that really struck me while you were talking is that I couldn't imagine AU Charlie coming over and dancing in the elevator.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, she had lost that in going through the apocalypse world.
Okay.
And I'm just impressed, that Felicia was able to do that and still keep it Charlie for us, and yet those significant differences, those little pieces that we were used to not be there, but for us to still get attached to this new one as well.
I'd love to dance like that in the glass elevators at Dragon Con, but there's not enough room. You're against the wall.
You'd have to come on Tuesday nights now in order to do that, right?
That's true.
One thing I want to make sure gets mentioned is Charlie is the focal point for the nerd in all of us. It's in a Charlie episode where they sit down and they watch Game of Thrones. And
oh, that's right, yeah.
And Charlie is the one who reads The Hobbit, sitting there at her mother's bedside. that's where there's the connection to the truly nerdy things that we all love. You know, she's the nerd in all of us.
Right.
They didn't
we-
buy GOT for themselves. They bought it for Charlie.
And she loved Star Wars with that Princess Leia tattoo and the references and Oz. You know, yes, you're right. Very much she was every geek.
She makes it okay for us all to be nerds.
Mhm.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, and all the figures on her desk, you know, she had
Oh,
the-
that's right. Yeah.
she talks to Hermione and calls her H.
Yeah.
And
Well, she identified with Hermione because
Of course.
Hermione was the smartest one in the room, and those books should have been about Hermione.
Arguably
It was the
so.
one who solved all the problems.
yeah,
So we have to talk about, you know, the Steins and Dark Dynasty and getting rid of the Mark of Cain. Like many characters in Supernatural, Charlie tries to get out. She basically tells Sam and Dean to lose her number after she helps the first time with Dick Roman. Of course, that doesn't last, and they find her again. And she helps again and says, I'm out of here, guys. And then they bring her in. It's kind of like, you know, on The Godfather, I keep trying to get out. They keep dragging me back in. And of course,
Yeah.
the same happened with Sam and Dean and the other characters, but we lost Charlie. What thoughts about her involvement in getting the Mark of Cain off Dean and that whole trilogy of episodes where things go bad really fast? Anne?
well, I was just thinking that I really liked seeing the interplay between Charlie and Rowena.
Yeah.
As they're trying, as Charlie is trying, you know, Rowena is all about the old ways, and Charlie is all about trying to translate it using a program on her computer. And so the clash of the different cultures was interesting, I thought. And but I really I question some of why the writers had Charlie leave the relative safety of where they were holding Rowena, and what was it, some kind of a basement, church basement or something. And I really questioned the writers doing that, and then them trying to keep I mean, because she knew she was safe there, but I know that, you know, she and Rowena were clashing, but why didn't she just go into a different room? You know, that sort of bothered me. And then, of course, with the Stein family, I really hated seeing them letting Charlie die.
Mhm.
I thought there had to be a better way, but and then of course that trips Dean over the edge with the Mark of Cain, and he goes on that killing spree at the Stein family mansion. And
yeah,
it's horrifying, but I suppose it was a vehicle. I suppose it was a vehicle for them to show how much the Mark was taking Dean over.
Yeah, it was. She left the safety of the basement even, and she parked in front of her hotel room, and she sat in front of the window at the hotel room, knowing people were hunting for her. I objected to them making her do stupid things just to get to a certain point in the plot.
Mhm.
If they needed to use her, if they needed to fridge her in order to give Dean motivation, at least respect her intelligence. And of course, not only does it fall into Supernatural somewhat iffy issues of fridging women killing them to create the motivation for men, but it also played in, unfortunately, to the bury your gays trope where, come on, let her live. Personally, I wanted to see her go off with Dorothy in Oz, and okay, Felicia's busy. She can't come and do episodes all the time, but we know she's off in Oz with Dorothy, and so we can retrieve her now and again. She's not dead, she's just busy. I would have loved to have seen that happen instead of the way we went, even though we did get an alternate her back later on. Lola?
Yeah.
I agree. That's one of the things that still riles me up. Even after all those years, I was so angry. I mean, angry to the point where I was like, I'm not gonna watch it anymore. Next week I watched it. But you know, I threatened. I was like, you hear that? I'm not gonna watch it anymore. So I threw a fit, and still every time someone mentions it, I'm like, makes me so angry. It was just so harsh and cold. She deserved better. I mean, let her go out in epic battle, you know, I mean, not hiding in a hotel room and someone comes and just, you know, just let her go out in a rage of fire like Daenerys in Game of Thrones. Spoiler. But, you know, she deserves her moment. And that just felt so anticlimactic.
Okay. Carol?
I mean, I agree with everybody in terms of, you know, well, number one, it was terrible to see her go, you know, to know that she was not going to be part of the show anymore. And yes, it bothered me for many years, their penchant for killing off women characters, you know, any of the female characters. And so I was always really glad that, you know, that the sheriff, Jody,
Jody.
that she hung around. You know, that at least she was, I thought, okay, they're not killing her off, but I digress. Anyway, I think it is significant, and maybe as a nod to us and how beloved the character was, that her death happened off screen. We saw the result of it. We did not see it actually happen, you know, and I think that that may have been, you know, kind of as a courtesy to the fans, because you knew what was going to happen, you know, because it broke away to commercial as soon as the whichever Stein guy it was, I don't remember, that
Eldon.
came upon her in the bathroom. You know how it's going to end at that point, or you have a pretty good idea. But that, you know, when the show is actually on, it did break right there. And then, of course, the next scene is when they're coming to look for her and they find her body. But I do think that that was supposed to give us, I don't know, maybe, you know, as I said, kind of a nod to the fans, I guess, to say, okay, well, she's dead, but at least you didn't have to watch the whole thing, you know, the kind of thing. And I appreciated that personally, but I did think that it was really sad. And when she was at Dragon Con one year, I got to do like a one-on-one thing with her that was primarily about her character on the show. And one of the things I asked her about, I said, well, and this was before, it was the season, it was at the end of the season after she had met her demise. So it was before we see her again in Apocalypse World. And I asked her, I said, well, you know, I pointed out that Robbie Thompson had written all of the episodes that she was in, except that one, the one where she died. And she said, yeah, she said, so to him, maybe I'll always still be alive. You know, and I was thinking, yeah, well, we all wish that, you know, that were the case. But I, you know, and I do get, you know, that they may have had, you know, motivation for doing it. I think sometimes it's hard to ascertain exactly what, you know, where they were going with a particular thing unless they come out and tell you this is what they were doing. Sometimes it's obvious. In that particular case, I think, you know, as people have mentioned, it sent Dean over the edge and you know, and caused some other things to, you know, have kind of a ripple effect. But I, you know, why, but as far as the plot itself goes, you know, at this point, I'm not sure that I could second guess what the writers were trying to do. I'm just sorry that it happened and that they, they had to do it, but grateful we didn't have to see it.
Well, it certainly gave us all a great deal of satisfaction to watch Dean take out the Steins.
Oh yeah, no problem there. Yeah.
I mean, we were on board with that. So that certainly turned us all into a bloodthirsty mob.
Now I
Oh,
didn't like it when he
that-
killed the kid, but yeah, the rest of the time, yeah.
Everybody else. Elektra.
Well, we did spend the better part of the season trying to figure out how to get rid of the Mark of Cain. And, there comes a time and you've got to get your best guys on it. And, they pulled out the big guns. They pulled out Rowena and she couldn't do it. And, then they pulled Charlie out of a hat and tried to get her to work on it. It took her and Rowena together to figure out the key to how to get rid of it. And, you got to get your best guys on it sometimes. And it wasn't great that they couldn't figure out a way to put her in harm's way without making her look like she was doing stupid things, and then set off that chain of events, because we already knew how dangerous the Steins were and how worked up Dean was going to have to be he needed a reason to really go after them. Otherwise, they were going to be a problem forever. And the writers probably knew that the big bad going forward, once the Mark of Cain was gone, was going to be someone else. Presumably, they knew once the Mark was gone, they were going to have the darkness. So had to be done. And, no one's ever really dead on Supernatural. I mean, after Bobby died, how many times did we see him, even before Apocalypse World?
Right.
They surely could have brought Charlie back in heaven, or she could have been resurrected, or, she could have turned out to not really be dead, or something. We certainly saw that with N other characters.
Mm-hmm. Which leads me to my last question, which is, what's your headcanon about the rest of AU Charlie's life? What do you think happened to her in the long run? Lola?
Well, presuming she got her girlfriend back, and presuming she came back, because everyone got snapped back, I think, right? We hope. So I'm thinking maybe she kept the mantle up because she's not one to back down. Always keep fighting. So I'd like to think maybe she had her own chapter. Maybe she started the Women of Letters here. I like that.
Good. I like that. I like that.
Yeah, so that's my headcanon. Women of Letters, they research, they have their own bunker, and they're all lesbians. Although, they're inclusive. You don't have to be a lesbian. You need to be cool with it, and maybe even a little curious, just a little on Saturdays, curious. But so that's my headcanon.
Carol, how about you?
I like the whole Women of Letters thing. I think that's a cool idea, but that was, that would certainly have been what I would have expected from our original Charlie, from Charlie 1.0. From Apocalypse World Charlie, I could see her becoming like a PI, and working cases that were regular human stuff, and they would have to be challenging and interesting, no cheating spouses kind of thing, but to try to get to the bottom of some issues. I could see her doing something like that and staying involved with hunters, or with that community, but not necessarily being a part of it anymore, since she had expressed an interest in kind of removing herself from that. So that's something I could see her doing.
Okay. Elektra.
Oh, she's clearly running front of house for Stevie's restaurant. I mean, they're happy. They've got this little breakfast place going, and it, you know, it closes at 2 o'clock every day, and they go for long walks, and they're just happy, content. They make enough money to keep themselves going, and they've given up on the whole hunting thing to lead a peaceful life.
Okay.
How about you, Ann?
Except for the occasional vampire nest, little one, just, you know,
Just a few, just a few.
now and again, you know, just so they don't get bored.
How about you, Ann?
Well, I don't know. I was thinking, I like all of your ideas, and I like Gail, your thought a few minutes ago about just, you know, she was just living a good life. But I also think that she would have to be doing something in IT, and I could see her designing a hunter video game.
There you go.
And you know, oh yeah, this isn't real, but you know, here's how you kill a vampire. You really kill a vampire, and here's what you do with a Wendigo, and here's, you know, all the different ones, and how you kill a djinn. She'd have to have that one in there. And so I could see her doing that and making a bunch of money to fund that restaurant, Elektra. And then they wouldn't have to worry about it, money, you know, because restaurants notoriously lose money. But if she had this really hit video game, they wouldn't have to worry about it.
Now, the Richchesters are going to buy the video game to use it to train their hunters with,
There you go.
and for millions of dollars.
Yeah. Yeah.
Underwritten by Hunter
They
Corp.
make very good training videos, you know,
Yeah.
training scenarios.
That's right, because they were still here at
Yeah.
the,
Yeah, for hunter.
man, those two were
Yeah.
hilarious. Oh my God.
And, you know, if she didn't go off to Oz and we have our AU Charlie with Stevie, an alternative for me, if you've seen the movie Gunpowder Milkshake, is that she's the Karen Gillian character in the Women of Letters version of that, with a library that has guns hidden in the book, money hidden in the book, all kinds of things hidden in the books. And Donna and Jody and Mrs. Tran and Tamara are the librarians, and Charlie is the younger assassin, and Stevie's restaurant is the diner that is the neutral place for all the assassins. So see, it all ties back up again. Well, folks, as usual, we've blown through our time. So thank you so much for being here. Let's go around and let everybody know where we can find you online, starting with you, Ann.
Well, I'm on Facebook as Ann Wicker, and I'm also on Twitter and Instagram, variations of the Ann Wicker with dots in there. And I'm also on the Team Free Will North Carolina Facebook group and here on Continual.
Very much. Elektra.
I'm Elektra Hammond, and you can find me at untilmidnight.com.
Carol.
Yes, you can find me a lot this year, or right at this time of year, I should say, on the Urban Fantasy Track Facebook page primarily. We do have a Twitter account also, but the Facebook page is the one where there's more activity. And if you go to Facebook and just plug in Dragon Con Urban Fantasy, you will find us. If you go to YouTube and put in Dragon Con Urban Fantasy, you will find any of the recorded virtual panels that we've done over the past couple of years, many of which Gail is on. And you know, there are plenty of them that are supernatural, but they're the track is a hybrid track, meaning I cover media and books. So I have some author interviews on there as well. So it's kind of a fun mix. But again, just look for Dragon Con Urban Fantasy and you'll find us.
Awesome. Lola?
My name's Lola Laracy. You can find me just about anywhere on the internet. You're going to find me or a bunch of old dead ladies, and I'm related to all of them.
And I'm pretty easy to find at gailzmartin.com, morganbryce.com. All my social media is a variation of those names. So if you spell them right, you get me. I will be at DragonCon on a whole bunch of panels, so I'm pretty easy to find. And as Carol said, I am indelibly part of a lot of the YouTube
Yep.
panels for DragonCon, as the ones on Supernatural anyhow. If you check out my writing in Winchester's YouTube, there are over 120 continual panels on Supernatural, and the number goes up every week. So there's plenty to watch. The Supernatural TFWNC group here on Facebook. I'm a columnist for the Winchester Family Business. But most of all, you can find me here at Continual. So thank you all so much for being here. And thanks to all of you for watching and listening. There'll be more Supernatural coming up here on Continual. So we'll see you online.